Now, over the past 2 decades, our firm has helped hundreds of people retire successfully, and I've heard firsthand stories of how these surprisingly simple mistakes can start to make your retirement very stressful and uncertain down the road. So in this video, I'll share what those mistakes are and how you can avoid them so you can retire confidently without worrying about running out of money or needing to go back to work. Americans across generations are carrying more debt today than they did 3 decades ago. And the research shows that this rise in debt has been especially steep among retirees. Now, when you retire early, you're making a massive shift from the security of a steady paycheck to now you're relying, for many of you, solely on a portfolio. And here's the hidden danger. There's a silent budget killer that could hurt you if you're not careful. And oftentimes, a lot of you that are working, you might be putting all your monthly expenses on a credit card and then you just pay it off at the end of the month. And that's never really a problem while you're working. But when you're retired, carrying a credit card balance might seem like a really small issue. But for me as a financial advisor, this might be a major red flag and one of the most overlooked signs of a larger financial problem, because many people think it's just part of their monthly routine, something that, hey, maybe I'll chip away slowly at. But when that balance lingers, again, I'm not talking about just one-off expenses, it often means that your retirement income isn't stretching far enough. And this can mean that you are calculating what you're spending wrong, which means if you're consistently carrying a balance, it might mean you're probably gonna have to play catch up constantly, which means maybe you're gonna need to take more from your portfolio than what your portfolio can handle. So the way I combat this with our clients is taking a closer look at their cash flow. Here's just kind of a look at the spreadsheet that I use to really help understand where the money is going. And you can do this for yourself, but when we understand this, we can really look under the hood of cash flow. Then you can be in a much better position, because it can be really dangerous if you ignore this, especially over many, many years. The retirees that I work with that have the greatest peace of mind, I know that I don't even have to worry about their credit cards because I know that we track their spending and that they never carry a balance. Research finds that only 4% of retirees are making the financial optimal decision about when to claim Social Security, which means a majority of people are leaving money on the table when they could have a better strategy. And that same study said that about 57% of retirees would build more wealth throughout their life if they waited to claim, for example, until age 70. So why are people not making the best financial decision when it comes to claiming their benefits? And how could this put you in a position where later on in retirement, you're losing spending power? Well, I call this the early bird trap. It's something I see all the time with those that want to retire early, and you feel really tempted to start Social Security as soon as possible. And of course, everyone is unique. And for some, it might be the right call to take it early. For example, if you have no other income sources or you don't think you're going to live really long. But claiming too early can sometimes come at a cost, especially for married couples. Claiming early doesn't affect your benefit. It could reduce the income of your spouse later on when it comes to the survivor benefit at a time when they might need that guaranteed income source the most. And the reason why this matters is if either of you outlive that break-even age, which, spoiler alert, is about 80 years old for most people, those smaller checks could mean a pretty big difference for your spouse later on. Now, for many people that retire early and have the resources to bridge that gap of not having benefits for those few years, delaying benefits, at least for the higher spouse, can give you a much higher survivor benefit. And that provides a much needed, inflation adjusted guaranteed income source in the long run. So while claiming early might feel like a quick win, the reality is that for some people, it could leave your spouse short. Now, we test this sort of things, and you could test this when you're building a plan. There's a lot of great retirement planning software online, but we want to see if, hey, can we bridge this gap sustainably, and can we delay it for the higher earning spouse? And if so, that can really help their plan. And there's a lot of theory and opinions on what the best time to take it is, but you need to run the numbers for yourself. You need to know whether delaying benefits is the best choice for you and your family. Don't take my word for it. You need to understand this by running a plan that will help you avoid the urge of claiming out of emotion and instead make a decision that's really based on a plan. So a few years ago, right before the election in late 2020, there was a lot of unknowns, of course. And this next one is a really easy mistake to make for a lot of people, and it's pretty unfortunate. Now, let's say we have a friend named Johnny. Johnny had a $1 million investment portfolio. And let's say it was 80% stocks and 20% bonds, right before the 2020 election. Now, Johnny really didn't think that things were going to go well in the stock market, and he was really worried about his retirement portfolio. So what Johnny did was he thought he made a really smart move and moved all his retirement portfolio to cash. So really he doesn't have to deal with the stock market potentially crashing. That's what he was thinking. So let's say he cashed out and his balance hit about $1.1 million, right in November before the election. Now, 1 year later, Johnny was surprised that things were actually trending upward, as you can see by this chart, and said, I know, now is the time to get back in. The reality is that as of recent, Johnny now has $419,000 less than if he stayed invested and didn't try to time the market. And even worse, if he decided to never get back in and just remain in cash to this day, he would have over $500,000 less, because if he stayed invested, had a written investment plan, he would now have about $1.6 million total. Now, the problem is that Johnny had to be right not just once, but twice, once when he got out and also once when he got back in. This is why letting emotions dictate your investment choices is one of the easiest ways to really go poor in retirement, especially if you retire early, because that $400,000 less is going to make a big difference over a span of 30 to 40 years. And before you retire, this is the best possible time to put together sort of a written strategy for those type of downturns. That might mean adjusting cash flow, withdrawals, cutting back extra spending. If you're strategic, you can even use some of these down markets to your advantage. For example, for the clients that we work with, we use tolerance bands as far as our rebalance strategy. Basically, it's a rules-based triggers that will help us manage when to rebalance a portfolio rather than just from our gut. And for example, back in early 2020, the triggers were happening as the market was trending downwards, and this let us rebalance accounts by buying more stocks at lower prices with the bonds and cash portion of the portfolio. And then you can see that the market recovered and clients were able to benefit from that because now they owned more stocks. Secondly, we were also able to complete Roth conversions when the market was down. So take some of that pre-tax money and then convert it to Roth. And then all that growth is now tax-free. Now, this is the real benefit of having a strategy in place that not only guides you when markets dip, but also allows you to capitalize on some of these market fluctuations. And now this is a power preparation. It really can turn market volatility from a risk to an opportunity. So this next one is super interesting. Many of you are probably familiar with this one, but I call it the housing trap. And there's a study that shows that individuals age 65 and older allocate approximately 34% of their annual expenditures to housing related costs. Now, while it is going to be a significant expense no matter what stage in life you are in, it could be especially difficult during retirement. And this is where we see, especially for baby boomers, there's a significant amount of the population that is very house rich, but cash poor. And having a large house with high property taxes, utility bills, and maintenance costs can really strain your resources, or at least a lot of people. And a lot of people, at least where I live in California, start to think about downsizing in retirement. But the reality is that in the environment we're living in today, at least with housing costs and interest rates, in practice, I don't really see a lot of people downsizing, at least in their own communities, especially in some of these higher cost of living states. Because if you're trying to downsize or reduce your costs within your own community, it often doesn't really create the savings that you'd expect. Most of the time, in reality, I see people moving to a lower cost of living state with low or zero income tax. Now, from a numbers perspective, this can really be a great decision. For example, this map shows all the different tax rates that each state has here in the US. Some have a 0% tax rate, and that can really add up to hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax savings over the long run, which means more spending for you. And here's where planning can make a big impact. If you are considering moving to a new state, this is really the perfect time to get strategic if you know that your housing costs are really going to be tough for you when it comes to your retirement spending, and running some of these long-term cash flow projections and getting some tax estimates to see how these different scenarios really could impact your finances. By doing that, it can mean that you can start to really weigh the costs of maybe staying in your current home versus moving to a different state. And that can help you make the best decision for you and your family. All right, speaking of spending and cash flow, they often say the question isn't at what age I want to retire, it's at what income. Retirement isn't about how much you saved or about how much you have in a portfolio. It's about how much you want to spend. If you need to spend more than what you have in resources, that's where you need to continue to work, or at least do some part-time to help bridge that gap. Where I see people losing spending power, really getting towards poverty, is not having a clear plan of what they can spend, taking a guess at what you're going to withdraw. And that could be a major red flag because you don't know if you're going to end up running out of money. Or on the flip side, you might be so overly cautious and you're not able to fully enjoy your retirement. This kind of uncertainty can result in either overspending and draining your savings or underspending and missing out on all these other experiences that you could have comfortably afforded if you just created a plan. And one of the most common ways people end up in this cash flow conundrum is just fully relying on a rule of thumb as their sole guide. The truth is, there's no one size fits all strategy. It doesn't work that way in practice. Everyone's financial needs and retirement goals are different. By setting up a plan, you can confidently enjoy your retirement, knowing that you have the funds to support your lifestyle today. At the end of the day, having a cash flow plan will help you not only manage taxes, know what accounts to pull from, when to start Social Security, but ultimately it gives you a lot of freedom and peace of mind to know that you can spend what you want to spend without the fear of going broke. But they say the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time is now. I always tell clients that the best way when it comes to planning is not to bury your head in the sand, but to be flexible and make adjustments along the way. I've met with clients before where we created a plan, they were going to retire in a few years and they lost their job, which means we have to go back to the drawing board. And these things can happen, right? And you don't want to be naive to think that's not going to happen in retirement and waiting to adjust your plan until it's too late. That's really where you can get yourself in trouble. Now, when your portfolio drops 40%, do you think you should continue to spend the same amount every single month? This is why we have guardrails and adjustments for those inevitable curveballs. And the most resilient retirement plans are proactive, not reactive. My clients that feel the most confident and enjoy the greatest peace of mind have taken the steps to prepare. That might mean having extra cash in the bank as far as a buffer, or setting up guardrails for their spending to know exactly when and by how much to adjust their withdrawals when their plan calls for an adjustment. And if you build in this flexibility and plan proactively, you're far less likely to make some of these mistakes and hurt yourself, especially if you're someone that wants to retire early. So these are some surprisingly easy mistakes that anyone can make when they retire early. Now, how do you know if you even have the right strategy or have enough to retire early? There are often signs that I often see where I say, yep, you're in a pretty good position to retire early. I made a video on what those signs are, and you can click the video right here to watch. Once again, this is Matt Calcagno, certified financial planner and advisor here at 1 Degree Advisors. If you'd like to talk to me or someone on my team about your financial plan, your plan to retire early, you can click the link in the description below and we'd be happy to talk with you.